So now that we have a client and now that we are able to send any request to Twitch system, we are going to implement a new feature, which is the polls. So as you can see on the Twitch API reference, there are three functions for polls. One is to get the list of all the polls, one is to create a new poll, and one is to end an active poll. I would tend to say the beginning is to create a poll, but first, what I want to know is what a poll looks like. Also, we need a scope to read the polls. We are probably going to need another scope to create a poll. So here we have a response for a poll. We can see that a poll has an ID. We have informations on the broadcaster. It's the channel on which we have created the poll. Title of the poll, list of choices. It has an ID, a title, a number of votes, and additional data about the poll duration, status, etc., etc. So let's create our poll class. As usual, we are going to start with an empty class. And the first thing I think I want to do is to include all the scopes related to the polls in this class as constant strings. That way we can access it from anywhere. And as I said, there is one for creating a poll as well. So we look at the response from Twitch, and we know that a poll has an ID, which is null by default. Broadcaster ID, name and login, we have them in the client. A title, an array of choices. I'm also interested only in the duration, private int duration. And the start time we can tell by ourselves what it's going to be in game time. So now let's create the choices class. It's inside the poll class because it's going to be used only by the polls. So a choice is an ID, a title, and a count of votes. There's 0 votes by default. Now that we have all this, we can create our constructor. So we need a client to send a request, a title, a duration in seconds, and an array of choices. The choices are a new array of choices. We also need to remember the client, and we are going to build the choices array. Choices I is a new choice. Let's make a constructor for the choices as well. So we create a new choice by passing as parameter the string, and our array is ready. Then we need to send the request to create. We are going to need a function to request an update. And we are going to need a function to request an end. So since we can have multiple requests, we are going to need to know if there is a request ongoing. We are going to need to know if the poll is started. And we are going to need to know if the poll is ongoing. Now that we have the base class, let's look at the request to send a poll. The URL is this, the post request. So client.send post request. We need the URL, we have it. We need the parameters, we don't have it. Create the JSON parameters. So we send the JSON. We need a callback when completed. On creation completed. We need a callback when there's an error in the request. On creation error. And finally, a list of query parameters. There are nothing, so we keep this empty. Okay, so all we need to do now is to create the JSON. New JSON object. I'm using Matt Schoen's JSON object library, which is included in the Github. It takes a little bit of time to get used to, but for me it's one of the most easy to use. So first parameter is the broadcaster ID, json.add field, broadcaster ID, and the value is, we have it in the client in theory, broadcaster ID. We need the title, json.add field title. We have it. We need an array of choices, so we need to create JSON array choices. It's an array. For each of our choices, we create a new object, JSON choice, JSON choice.add field title. we need the title, and that's all we need. So now we add our choice to the array of choices, and we add our array of choices to the main JSON. And the name is choices. What are we missing? Duration. We have not added the duration. So we create the JSON parameters. The JSON is ready. We send the request to create the poll. We have a request ongoing, so we remember that. If there's been a mistake during the creation, we won't do anything. There is no request ongoing anymore. When the creation is completed, there is no request ongoing anymore. We have the start time, and we need to read the answer. A response looks like this, and our request system has already converted it into a JSON object. So to make things easier, we are going just to create a parse JSON function, which is going to update the poll with the given JSON. So what does this JSON looks like? We have a data array, get field data. We know there is going to be only one, so we take the first result. In it, we have the ID. We don't have this ID, so we are going to read it. So we get the field ID and we put it in the ID. Broadcaster ID, broadcaster name, broadcaster login, we already have those in the client. Title, we already have it. Choices, we don't have the ID, so we need to get the choices. Get the choices for each of the choices, and we are going to need a parse JSON function in the choices. So choices I parse JSON choices dot list number I. So each choice gets parsed. Is there anything else we need to parse? No. Okay. So let's create the parse JSON function for the choices. And in a similar fashion, we need the ID, we need the number of votes, and that's all we need. We already have the title. The started variable could be smarter than just a bool, because start time is negative when the request isn't started. So be started is just start time is bigger than 0. Okay, let's request an update. We can only request an update if we don't have a request ongoing and if we have started. If this is not the case, we don't do anything. What does the update function looks like? It's the same URL but as a get. We have some query parameters and only one is required. It's the broadcaster ID. It does take a list of IDs that it identify the polls to return, so we are going to specify which ID we want. So we have an ongoing request now, and with the client, we send a GET request to this URL. When it's completed, on update completed. When there's an error, on date error. Do we have query parameters? Yes, we have two. We said we have broadcaster ID, which is client.broadcasterinfo.id, and we have the ID of the poll. ID is SID. We create the missing methods on update completed and on update error. As request ongoing is false. If the update is completed, look at what the response looks like. We've already seen this kind of response. So what we can do is we use our parse JSON function, and it's going to update all the data of the choices, etc., etc. Finally, to end a poll, it's a patch request with the data sent as a JSON. We need the broadcaster ID, the ID, and a status. We create the JSON. The JSON contains three fields: broadcaster ID, which is stored in the client, the ID of the poll, and the status as terminated. We send a request, which is a patch request. The URL is on the documentation. No query parameters. We have a request ongoing. On end completed. We parse our JSON because the answer, as usual, looks like the same. In order to make things easier for the user, let's add, as usual, an extension for the client. create poll, which takes the client as this feature, and title duration choices. Return new poll client title duration choices. And we are already done. We have included all three of the poll features, a get, a post, and a patch, in a pretty easy to use class, so we are going to use it at least once. Sadly, my channel doesn't have the rights to create a poll. While I have tested this on a friend's channel, I can show right now what it's going to result in. And that way, when we are anywhere with a client, and when the client is ready, we can create a poll. My test, 20 seconds. Yes, no. This returns to us a poll. And the poll can request an update, can request an end. We can view the list of choices, and we can get the number of votes in these choices. I think one thing we can do to make things easier is request update returns a boolean. If it couldn't start the request, it returns false. If it could, it returns true. Same for request end. We can request an update, we can request an end, we can look at the results. All of that in less than 4 lines. I hope this tutorial has been easy enough for you. So we are done. Have a nice day. Bye.